Imagine a patient lying in bed in a white room in hospital. Their condition is bleak, being a coma patient that is near brain dead. Essentially, non-conscious but alive, like a plant. There is hope though, if the patient can have an exchange blood transfusion between them and another person. But there's a catch. These two people must be connected via machine 24/7 for 9 months. You could call it a sort of temporary organ donation. So, the doctors go out to try and find someone to be this donor. After searching all they can only find one person in the whole world compatible with this patient. Let's call this patient Jessie Doe. The procedure is then explained to Jessie and they consent. Say then 5 months pass. The patient is now unconscious but sleeping, in a dreamlike state but can't wake up yet. For Jessie though, they can't take it anymore. Jessie consented at the beginning and tried for 5 months, but can no longer go along with the procedure. Consent is withdrawn, and so there's one last decision to be made. Turning off the machine which connects the two, and so leading to the death of the patient. But there's one last thing to consider. To give the patient a humane death, instead of a slow drawn out one, the machine is set up to give the patient a fatal electric shock when turned off. With great regret, Jessie Doe flicks the switch. Should this be legal? If you've seen the title of this video, you know this is meant to be an analogy for abortion. And in it, I assume the fetus is a person just like anyone else, including with a right to life. Nevertheless, I still believe it leads to the conclusion that abortion would be justified and should be legal in this situation, though of course it would be tragic. So my argument based on this analogy would be that if you believe you should be able to withdraw consent from organ donation or a blood transfusion, and as well as that, believe in the legality of lethal self-defense, then you should also believe that abortion should be legal. Generally, few people would argue that you can't withdraw consent from organ donation. And even if the procedure was already underway, you could still withdraw consent. Or if you consider the analogy but change slightly, if instead it was a weekly blood donation instead of constant, I doubt many would argue that the state should be able to force you to continue to donate blood. If this is all true, then the issue isn't whether you can withdraw consent. Rather, it's whether lethal force can be used to enforce that decision. Again, if you believe in reasonable self-defense, I think the answer must be yes. In any other situation where you didn't consent to your body being used or harmed, but they continue to do so, self-defense with deadly force would generally be considered tragic but justified. One reply might be that the fetus is innocent, which is of course true about the fetus and the patient. But innocence does not preclude self-defense. For example, if someone was hit on the head in such a way that it damaged the part of their brain responsible for moral judgment and responsibility, if that person attacked you, you'd still be justified in using whatever force necessary to defend yourself, even though they're innocent. Another reply could be that you put that person, either the fetus or the patient, in the position where their life is dependent on you. This is again, of course, true. But it's also true, firstly, if you hadn't made them dependent on you to live, they would be dead now anyway. And secondly, you had no duty to give them life in the first place. It was a charity, beyond the call of duty. So just like you had no obligation to begin that charity in the first place, you also have no obligation to continue that charity if you withdraw your consent. So that concludes my overall point. If you agree you can withdraw consent from organ donation, even once someone is dependent on you, and you believe in self-defense, then you should support the legality of abortion. Please feel free to tell me in the comments if you think this is a good analogy. Also, let me know if you think I've missed out any objections to this argument. Thank you for listening, and I'd appreciate it if you liked, commented and subscribed.